Okay. And again, we have different components here. We have a check valve here that's going to come undone. We're going to take the air filter apart right now. That'll come undone just like this. Now, inside this air filter is a cartridge, okay? And you're going to want to replace this cartridge once in a while. Right now, Matt's going to be pulling apart the head. And this is a speed air compressor you pick up at Granger's. This particular compressor has metric bolts to it. And as automated technicians, you're going to have a maintenance, you're going to have a metric and a standard set in your socket set, right? So what Matt's going to do is he's going to he's pulling the head bolts right now. He's going to pull the head bolts, and then the cylinder bolts will just come undone.
You should need a power tool. Where's the impact?
Pneumatic wrench. You should use the compressor to take it apart.
Well, we can't use the compressor because we've got it tore apart now. So basically, he's going to pull the head, and then the barrel will come right off, and you'll see the piston and the crankshaft and all of that, the rings, connecting rod. One thing you want to do before you start doing this is pull the oil out of it, drain the oil out of it.
Has it been done?
And on the bottom side, there's a drain plug, and there's a fill spout on the other side.
Let's pull.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Do we make marking before we take it out, take it apart, like the orientation?
No, you don't really need to mark it for
No.
orientation because it's basically the same. There's only one way to put it back together. But, you know, taking pictures of it, marking it isn't a bad idea. That way you've got identification. You'll notice that the barrel bolts are really long. You gotta remember, this thing's building a lot of pressure, so these bolts have to be really tight. And they're torqued at the factory. So you have to take your manufacturer specs on torquing it down. Now, first of all, we have the head here. Okay, if you notice, the head is cast aluminum, and we have chambers here. This is the port that takes in the air, and there are no baffles or no restriction. This is the port that's putting the air out, or the exhaust port. Now, the exhaust port basically has baffles in here to try to reduce the moisture level as it's going out of the compressor pump head. Okay. The compressor cylinder itself, you'll notice, has valves in here. These open and close to let the air go out. Okay. This head will go back on here just like this. So you've got an intake side and you've got an exhaust side. These little valves here are just little springs. Okay. Go ahead and pull that barrel off now. There's the top plate. Now, you'll notice you have two pistons in here. You want to inspect your pistons, your cylinders on your pistons, to make sure there's no scoring, scratching, or anything like that. Okay, you may have to turn the crankshaft to get the other one. These are not dome pistons like a car or like a handy motor. They're actually flat piston heads because you're compressing air. Okay, These are tied to the crankshaft. Now, when Matt pulls this barrel off here, you're gonna see the pistons, you're gonna see the O-ring, you're gonna see the rings, and you're gonna see all that stuff in retrospect. Okay, Matt, go ahead. Anyway,
Slap me.
there you go. It's gonna be kind of tight to pull that head off, as you can see.
I made a game.
Wanna cut the video, cut it,
Take two, right?
Take two, yeah.
You can see that the rings make this really tight on there. You want that tight seal. Again, you notice that this is really tight to pull off there. It's basically the rings on the piston. Okay, now you have the cylinder walls here. And the cylinder walls, again, you have a gasket on it. Okay, it's finned, it's cast iron, it's machined out. And you want to double check and make sure your cylinder walls are not scored, scratched, scraped. They're not in bad shape. If they are, you can take some emery cloth or you can hone them out again. On these, you gotta make sure that this gasket's in place when it goes back together. Okay, so that's a key important thing. We're gonna set that aside right now. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the pistons. These are aluminum pistons. If you notice, they're lubricated for assembly. On here, we're gonna have two sets of rings. We're gonna have a top set and a bottom set. Okay, some of these will have three sets of rings. These are aluminum pistons, just like a car. We have a connecting rod here that goes to the crankshaft. We have bearings down here. As the shaft turns, you'll notice that the crankshaft will raise one piston and lower the other piston. Okay, just like that. These pistons are very important that as you're working on them, you don't scrape them, scratch them, or anything else. These have retaining pins right here and here. They take a snap ring to pull them out. In the event that you've got a piston that looks like this, then you got a problem. Okay. These compressor pumps come in different sizes, different shapes. The V-twin would be just like this, only it would be mounted V-twin. Okay. This one here doesn't have any oil in it. It's just got a little bit of assembly oil, and that's kind of pretty much about how they work. This would be where your prime mover ties into. So you're going to have a big fan pulley on there with a V-belt drive. Very seldom on compressors do we ever run chain drives or direct drives unless it's a vane compressor. With this particular compressor pump, it's all cast iron. Some of them are aluminum. They will beat themselves to death being aluminum. Some of the heads that you'll find, this particular head is cast iron. Some of the heads that you'll find are aluminum sleeve with steel sleeves. Okay, it's all in the cost of the compressor. If you go into Harbor Freight, you're going to pay a minimum amount of money. Chances are it's going to be an aluminum head compressor with sleeves in it. To pull this apart, you want to basically pull the end plate here off. Okay, right here. And then this bearing will come apart, and then the whole camshaft, crankshaft can come out, and it's no problem. What you want to do is you want to inspect your bearings here for looseness. If they're sloppy, then you want to replace the bearings on the crankshaft. When you pull this apart, inspect the crankshaft to make sure that it's not gouged, doesn't have any hard spots in it, doesn't have any wear and tear. And then, of course, when you put it back together, you'll need a ring compressor. Okay, you'll compress the rings, put the head back on it. This particular one's going to take 2 sets of hands, maybe 3. Okay, I'm going to leave it disassembled for right now so everybody can take pictures. But this is basically it. So I can pull that apart. Now on this part here, this is the valve plate. You'll notice there's a little reed valve on here, like this. Okay, as the air is being pushed into this valve will open and close just like that. Okay, the air is being sucked in there, and as the compressor moves up and down, it creates a little vacuum on this. Okay, and it's going to push this out. This is your exhaust port right here. So the air is coming in here, and once the air gets sucked in, it closes this little reed valve. Okay, as the air is being sucked out, it's being sucked out through this port here, and again, there's an O-ring here, and it's going out through this port here in the head. An important thing is to inspect the reed valve, because sometimes these reed valves are stainless steel springs. Sometimes they get worn out. You have to replace them. Okay. Some of the other compressor pumps that we use, they actually have little valves on them like a car would. Here's your filter here. This would actually screw into the compressor head. This is a filter element. It kind of looks like an air filter for a car, right? Okay, real inexpensive piece of equipment, real inexpensive part, but it saves the life of your compressor. This will fit in here just like this, okay? And the most important thing is just to replace it, okay? This one's a brand new pump, so you're not gonna see how dirty it is. But in the event that it's really dirty, you can take an airline and clean it out temporarily until you get another one, just like a car. Now, one more thing on that is there are manufacturers like K&N that make filters for these compressors. And they're reusable and rewashable, so you can reuse them and wash them. Now, on the exhaust port of this compressor pump, this is the intake, this is the exhaust, you can run this into a drying system to reduce the moisture. We talked about that the other day. We've got a desiccant type drying system that uses the little blue beads, okay, and that reduces the moisture in it. Or for a bigger compressor pump, you can run this and put it into a refrigerated unit. Okay, it all depends on how much moisture you want to eliminate in your compressor pump. The main thing is to inspect the compressor head. Because this is aluminum, it will get hot and it'll warp. So you want to take a surface edge or a straight edge, run across here and double check it. You want to set it on a surface table, make sure that it's not warped. If it's warped, you want to take it over to the machinist and have them surface grind it. Generally, this is the part that really gets worn out. Gaskets
How
on
about
this.
this one? Did it ever crack or?
Well, because it's aluminum, it'll take a lot of heat. But the biggest thing on this is the valves. Okay, these little stainless steel spring valves. Okay, because there's a set here and there's a set here. One's for exhaust and one's for intake. These will break down. You also have a gasket that's in here. You have a gasket that goes on here between the head and the barrel. You have an O-ring in here to prevent dust and moisture from getting on the inside of the crankcase. Then you have the flange bearing here, and you have a bearing on this side here. Very important to keep this thing lubricated, because if it runs out of oil, it's like a car. It runs out of oil, it'll seize up. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far?
No, the brackets, do they ever break?
Yeah, these will crack and break. They're just cast aluminum.
Okay.
On some of your better compressors, they could be titanium or stainless steel. And the reason why they'll crack and break is because you let the compressor get hot, and you let the compressor get hot because it's low on oil. When you run out of oil and lubrication on this thing will get extremely hot, and that's when parts decide they're going to fly apart, and parts are going to fail. You can run this compressor probably for a good 30 years and not have any problems. Again, it depends on application, use, and maintenance. You know, everything has to be maintained and taken care of. When you go to put this thing back together, you're gonna use a ring compressor, you're gonna compress the rings, drop the barrel back on here, and then you're gonna crank it up and get the other one on here, okay? And then you'll put this plate back on, and you'll put the head back on there, just like this, okay? And then what you're gonna do is, lastly, put your filter on there. Now, right now, I can turn the crankshaft very easily because there's very little pressure on here, okay? But once these get into the barrel, it's gonna get tight because the rings are on there. Now, you can replace the rings on these very simply. This is very similar to a car motor, only you don't have a spark system, but you do have an intake and an exhaust. And with an automobile or a motorcycle motor, you gotta keep it lubricated. You gotta keep oil in the thing. Because if you don't have oil in it, it's gonna seize up, freeze up, and you're gonna have a compressor pump to either rebuild or replace. Your compressor pumps range in cost. If you go with the one from Harbor Freight, they go from about $200 up, and you can spend up to $20,000 just for a compressor pump. So that's pretty much that on that. There's a nameplate on the side of this thing that tells you the maximum horsepower that you can run on this for a prime mover. And if you need to order parts from it, then you can go to Speed Air, who's the manufacturer of this compressor, or if it's DeVille Bliss or whoever, go to the manufacturer and get the specifications off of this. You can order a rebuild kit. Your rebuild kit is basically going to consist of the O-rings you need for this, the gaskets you need for this, and new rings. Okay, and then you can put it together once you get it. And once you get it together, you need to put it down on a bench, bolt it together, and you can put a cordless drill on it to drive it or whatever. But before you take it out in the field, you should test it. Okay? Anybody have any questions?
Where your oil come in at, and then where you drain it at?
Okay, your oil drain is located right here on this side.
Okay.
Now, what I would suggest is this is going to be mounted onto a tank. Take yourself a piece of pipe and extend that out and put a plug in it. That way, when you drain the oil, you're not making a mess all over your compressor tank or anything like that. Your oil intake is right here. Okay, so for that, you need a little funnel and probably a little bottle or something. And then on the side here, we have a sight glass. The sight glass is basically kind of like a dipstick. It tells you how much oil is in the compressor. And again, if you overfill it, then it starts blowing out through the cylinder. Okay, so you want to watch your sight glass. There's instructions here on how full to get it. And you don't want to use regular 30 weight automotive oil in this. There's compressor oil with a viscosity specification and a temperature specification. So it's very important to follow the manufacturer specifications on all this stuff to make sure it works. Okay?
When the cylinders get worn out, can you
Resurface it?
Yeah, surface.
You can actually resurface them, yes. If they're just kind of scratched a little bit, you can take some emery cloth, or you can take a hone and put in there and put on a drill, or you can take it over to a machine shop, they'll hone it out for you,
Are they get too big
or you
for
can
the
just replace.
pistons?
In that case, then what I would do is consider the circumstances as to why the cylinder walls are out of shape, and look at the pistons, okay? There's a reason why there's a reason for everything. In the event that the pistons are bad, these are aluminum pistons, these are very easy to replace.
Oh, okay.
That's cast iron, and it's machine cast iron, so that's probably a little harder to mix. But the only thing that would cause the barrel to get scratched is if you break a ring, because these rings are hardened, and it could scratch the heck out of the inside of that barrel.
This is metal too, right?
Yes, these are hardened spring steel. That's why you need a spring compressor, so you can compress this down to get that on there.
Okay.
Whereas yesterday you were using your fingers and you were pushing the cups into a pneumatic cylinder. This you actually have to use a spring compressor tool. Okay? Anybody else have any questions?
No.
Okay, guys, thank you very much.